officers for taking the trouble to follow our direction. Thank you.
No problem. As long as we keep coming up with positive suggestions, I'm sure they'll be very proactive. I represent Mickleover Ward as well. I didn't say that. So the second thing before we move on is, again, customary now, is recommendations, if there are any, brought forward and seconded. We can give you time to compose those and send them via email to Stephen or myself or we have paper and you can write on it and bring it forward. So that's, again, something which we started last meeting and we're going to continue that as well. Item 3 is any declarations of interest at all? No? Okay. Item 4 is minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of June this year. Are there any matters arising and can we agree those? Okay, thank you. Moving on then. Item 5 is forward plan. Over to you, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, forward plan item, the updates are as usual on page 3, I think that is. 3. Yeah, so it's the...
Page 5.
Page 5, sorry, yes. So it's the items that have been added and any withdrawn items. I think there's nothing more for me to say at this point.
Fine. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the forward plans printed in the agenda? Oh, that's right.
Yeah, you have to apologise, my first meeting, so part of this will be just clarifying the roles, but there's an item on the forward plan to extend and review public space protection orders to prohibit antisocial behaviour. It seems a very narrow item for the forward plan when you consider the issues around antisocial behaviour in the city centre and things like the recent antisocial behaviour work. I don't know whether it's in our remit to recommend extension of that piece of work to cover other potential areas for public space protection orders, and also to make it more broad in terms of giving other outcomes apart from just the order itself. And there's issues around the order itself. If you see the signage in the city centre, it's very, very complicated. And, you know, I think there's issues that we could do to simplify that for the public. So it's an observation, really.
Yeah, Steve.
Sorry, Pop, is there anything you could, is that something you could take on board?
Yeah, we can. I think it's something obviously to be discussed outside of today's meeting.
Absolutely, yeah.
Have that discussion.
Okay, are we happy with that? Have a conversation? That's no problem. Thank you very much. Okay, item 6 then is overview and scrutiny forward plan. Now, I've got the printed version here, which hasn't formatted very well. I don't know if it's the same for yourselves. It's kind of zoomed in, like it's on the wrong format or something. But I did notice when I was looking at the agenda electronically, all of the different working items for the various overview and scrutiny committees and boards. And, for example, the Strategic Transport Board, our recommendation to look at the climate change was in there as well. So that's good news. But it does show you, it gives you a broad overview in terms of what all the other scrutiny boards are going to be working on over the next municipal year, and us being obviously the more overarching board for that. So that's going to be an interesting document moving forward. And I'm sure we'll, as we move forward as well during the municipal year, we'll find more information about that. And obviously it's our job to scrutinise what they're doing as well as everything else in terms of the cabinet. So I'm sure we can do that positively. Any questions or comments on that? Oh, Councillor Wright.
Yeah, the section for this board is clear, which I assume is because the scrutiny of all the other boards, but I just wonder whether local government review ought to be something this board has a strategic overview on. You know, there's a lot going off that, you know, that's taking place, and apart from very infrequent reports back to council, for me, this would be an ideal board to be able to scrutinise progress.
In terms of this council's interaction with the LGA, etc., or I mean, is there something specific that you wanted to explore, or is it just?
Well, the proposals for local government reorganisation as it affects the city.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen, I would have thought that that would automatically come through full council. Is it more of a full council issue rather than a cabinet issue? Just trying to work out what the framework's going to be, because it has to be taken to full council for ratification before we can submit. Yeah, I think we need to have a think about that one, because I'm not quite sure which the pathway is going to be here. I think it's mostly full council, but if it does go to cabinet in elements or in the whole as we move forward, then it will certainly come through here as automatically, because obviously we scrutinise what the cabinet are considering. But I take it on board. It is a big one. We'll have to keep an eye on that one, I think, is what I'm saying. Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's the bottom of the first page. Sorry, the numbers have gone off. At the recent Personnel Committee, I think it's cut off it, but I think it says Personnel Committee have referred matters. And that's true. At the recent Personnel Committee, we have restructured and streamlined, shall we say, the Personnel Committee's responsibilities. Although the meetings are still in the diary, the Chair did say to us that they might not take place because of the workload having been reduced. But what I know Councillor Bumps, we spoke on an issue in that the matters referring to sickness and attendance are now not coming to Personnel Committee. They are going to the relevant Scrutiny Board, and forgive me, I can't remember which one. And my fear of that is we will then overload that Scrutiny Board, and they perhaps not as diligent at looking at the figures as the Personnel Committee would be. And forgive me if I'm being disrespectful there, but that was what we felt. So I think we ought to look at that carefully. What the officer did say at the meeting was that when a particular item is going to the Scrutiny Board as appropriate, we will be told about it, so that if we wish to attend as members of the Personnel Committee, we can do if we wish. But I just wanted to highlight that there was some concerns about that issue, and that we're wanting to review it next year to see how it's gone and how the workload has affected, and also looked at the workload of the Personnel Committee, because it may well not meet. I know I'm speaking perhaps ahead of term, but we'll know that at this time next year. Just an observation, Chair. Thank you.
No, you're absolutely right to bring it up, and you reminded me actually, because I was slightly confused over the purpose of the Personnel Committee. I mean, we've just gone through the AGM, we've elected a chair and members to that committee, and there was no, as far as I remember, there was no debate about the purpose of or a change or effectively the lack of a Personnel Committee moving forward, but the sounds of things. So I think it is an important issue for us to learn more about. I mean, maybe we should be asking officers just to clarify, maybe in the next meeting or via contact with all the members of this board, as to what the decision-making process was that led up to, obviously, members, I'm assuming, are turning up for the Personnel Committee, being told effectively we may not be meeting because it's been delegated to the ONS. So yeah, I share those concerns, and we do need to understand what the logic is behind that, because I'm not sure there's been a wider debate for us as councillor cohort to actually understand why that decision, which may be valid, but we need to understand it, I think, as a board. Councillor Bonser.
Yes, I think the rationale given was that a large part of the agenda at the Personnel Committee is usually covered. It usually covers reporting on staff sickness, well-being, staff absence, and those sorts of areas. But actually, they established that that wasn't part of the constitution of that committee, even though that's really been a big focus of the scrutiny, I suppose, that we as councillors have been able to give to that subject. And it's been moved to Corporate Services and Cost of Living Board, I believe, that responsibility. But of course, they've set their work programme for the year ahead, so it's unlikely that those matters are going to be considered. So that's where they're at, really. I mean, the Personnel Committee's remit is actually going to be quite small now, and as Councillor Bolton has said, it's unlikely that the committee will meet every time because it just won't be necessary. There'll be nothing on the agenda. But I agree, Chair. We've just appointed a chair, and along with the payments that a chair will receive, I think to some extent it's perhaps been done the wrong way around, because if notice would have been given that that was what was going to happen, then maybe that subject that is important, really, for us as councillors to understand in terms of staff attendance and well-being might have been included in a work programme for one of the other scrutiny committees.
Sorry, Emily, I didn't notice you indicating. I'm sure you're going to shed some light on this for us.
I can help. Firstly, I don't believe there's an SRA attached to the Chair of Personnel Committee, is my understanding, but we can double check that point. But the point I was going to raise in relation to the work plan is that Corporate Services Scrutiny Board are meeting on Wednesday to discuss their work plan for the year ahead. And issues around wellbeing and staff sickness is on the proposal for the work of that scrutiny board over the coming year. So that opportunity has not been lost. And I think the rationale that you described, Councillor Bonser, for moving... The role of the Personnel Committee should not be actually to scrutinise in the same way, and actually the best place for a deep dive into issues like wellbeing and staff absence, etc., is a scrutiny board, and therefore that work is better placed in that forum. So that's what that is definitely. It is better placed in that forum. I understand the concerns about timing, and I'm not privy to why the timing has worked out in the way that it has. But in terms of forum, it is the better forum for that work.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. This is for clarity, really. Unfortunately, the margins as such on this sheet, the information is not entirely clear. The item violence against women and girls, under the theme of board, it will be discussed, or it's here for the 22nd of September 25. I would have thought that certainly with relation to young girls, that it also should be featured in the above theme for young people. Or could it be the case that violence, grooming, etc., will be picked up under safeguarding?
Okay, well, can we take that away and get clarity on that? I mean, it's not a recommendation, but if we can just get some clarity on that, and if you need to just catch up with Councillor Wright, just to be clear as to what she was saying, then that might be the option. Would that be okay? Just going back to the Personnel Committee, I just think it would have been useful to get heads up on it, really, as the sort of overarching scrutiny board, because I don't think any of us were aware that there were going to be changes. So it may well work very well if those issues are spread around the various ONS effectively, but I don't think even the chair of the Personnel Committee was aware, as far as I'm aware, that they were going to go to the first meeting and then be told effectively, well, you're not going to be doing anything this year, most likely. So yeah, I mean, it's just a change to the structure, and I wasn't aware that we did that in all the time that I've been a councillor. It's sort of set in stone for the municipal year. So just a little bit of background on that one, if we can ask for that as well, Stephen. Just the rationale. Yeah, just so we understand it, because we are supposed to be overarching of all of that, and it'd just be good to understand what the logic is. We maybe can help and just do the check and balance to make sure all the areas that we want scrutinising are actually going to be via the other ONS. Okay, I think it does, well, last time I looked, it did carry an SRA, so we need to look at that as well. So that's
Chair, if
probably
I can,
something-
I've just had a look on the budget papers from last year. The Chair of Personnel does have an SRA, but the Vice Chair doesn't.
Yeah, and I'm not going to cause a massive issue about that, but I think, again, moving forward towards the next AGM, we're going to obviously have to look at that, but that's probably for another day. But yeah, we get some more clarity on the Personnel Committee. Okay. I forgot where I was now. Where are we? Okay, yeah. Item 7. So, Council Cabinet responses to scrutiny recommendations which were attached accordingly. I don't know if there's any notes on any of that from anybody. Okay. So, moving on to the Council Cabinet agenda. Okay, we'll skip through the items which we won't be dealing with. Okay. Obviously, they'll be dealing with any recommendations that we put forward from tonight's meeting. And then we've got key decisions. And the first one is food safety, food standards, animal feed, and item 8, this is, and health and safety service plan 2025 to 2026. And I assume, oh, here we go. You're going to tell us that it's a report that's brought every year, etc. So off you go.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Perhaps you would like to introduce this item. But thank you very much. The members will be familiar with this item because, as the Chair just said, we do bring this report to you every year. Apologies for the very long title. The title, together with the template of the report that is attached as your appendices, they are both prescribed by the Food Standards Agency, the FSA, so we don't have any choice really in the format that report comes to you. It is also a requirement of the FSA that we do bring this apologies, that we do bring this plan to Cabinet's attention every year. Essentially, the plan is a work plan. It's a work plan for the food and safety team and also for the trading standards team. It sets out the challenges that those two teams face. It also sets out their approach to the inspections, the priorities that they take when they're determining which inspections to do first, and it also sets out the profile of those inspections. In other words, what businesses we are typically inspecting and how often, and indeed the outcome of those inspections and how many are succeeding and how many of those inspections are raising significant issues. The report also then goes on to look at the performance of the team and I suppose by definition, the performance of those companies that are being inspected. The report to Cabinet also highlights that these two teams were heavily involved in the Council's COVID response, which inevitably meant that they built up a backlog of cases, but I'm pleased to say that it does also indicate that certainly in relation to urgent cases, last year we did 100% of urgent inspections within the timescales prescribed. The report recommendations, Chair, are listed 2.1 to 2.3, and you'll note, Chair, that 2.3 seeks authorisation for the Strategic Director of Place to be able to make any minor changes to the plan that may arise throughout the year. Thank you, Chair. I'm open to questions, and I have my colleague Doug Walkman here, the Head of Regulatory Services, to help with those. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Can I be the first to say that we thank the team for all their hard work on what is sometimes working very hard behind the scenes and not front-facing as well to keep the city safe. I know firsthand this kind of work that goes on, and it really is exceptional work, and I'd like to thank all the officers again for their enthusiasm under very limited resources as well. I know it's a very big challenge, so thank you for that. Are there any specific questions on Councillor Wright?
First of all, I'd like to reinforce the observations that you made. I've got a few points, and then I'd like to suggest a recommendation to add to the list. The three that are there, I would support. It seems to me, apart from the fact of trying to recover from COVID, that the service area is overwhelmed by legislative requirements that are increasing year by year, and it seems to me that trying to manage all that is going to be a real challenge, as you know, as it is now. That's why I would, looking at particularly your work plan moving forward, and particularly paragraph 8.7, where you identify 5 areas that would help you do your business more effectively. The recommendation I'd like to make is that those 5 points, plus another 2 that I think need to be added in, actually we make a recommendation that before the budget setting at the end of this year, that a properly costed business plan is formulated to actually include those recommendations and a couple of more. The introduction to this overview says this is a high priority for the council, but when you actually look at those 5 recommendations that are not actioned, or they don't appear to be actioned, I don't see how that correlates. So in addition to those 5 areas, forming part of a properly costed business plan, I'd also propose that we actually put in another one to include productivity and efficiency saving element, because I do think that it's alluded to in there about a mobile app for your officers out in the field. I know a lot of US local authorities, municipal, have mobile apps to do regulatory things. It sounds as though we don't here. So I do think there's an element of productivity, but also trying to feed back to the government where necessary, where those legislative burdens are no longer relevant or overburdensome. I didn't see any of that actually trying to challenge some of those issues. So basically to include a productivity element in it and then go back with that to budget setting for next year, so we don't leave these issues in limbo during the year. A couple of comments. When you're talking about productivity, the calculation that you use uses the full year. In commercial business sector, it's typical that you use 253 days, which is actually the working element. Because you've used 365, it automatically inflates the figures. When you actually take 253 days, when you look at training, downtime and meetings, that's about 30% of product time, and it seems to me that those administrative, well, they're not even administrative functions, they're staff support functions, etc. That's a big element of a productive. So that's why I want to say include a productivity. It might be, I'm not judging it, but when you look at industry standards, that's a very, very high proportion in terms of training, downtime, etc. At the end of the day, you are £1 million plus budget with, now, so it's not an insignificant area of business. So apart from those observations, that's what I'd like to propose. We had an additional recommendation, words to effect that a properly costed business plan with those 5 elements plus productivity plan included is developed and then put forward for the budget process, so we can actually hopefully provide the resources commensurate with the workload. Thank you.
Okay, so some of those are operational issues. So if we're dealing with Cabinet to agree the service plan for the next year, just trying to square that circle in terms of how your recommendations fit into this decision and the adoption of this plan. So I don't know if we could get some kind of clarity or sort of ideas on how we might be able to put forward a recommendation, if it's seconded, to Cabinet to capture some of the things that you've said. I mean, what's your advice, Stephen, or even from officers? Yes, should we, I mean, have you got some thoughts on that as how we could potentially put some positive recommendations to Cabinet in terms of accepting this plan?
Thank you, Chair. I would have thought, obviously, if members are minded, we could accept the plan, recommend that members accept the plan, but that they do undertake, that officers then should undertake a review of where additional resources would be helpful, and to then raise that during the next budget setting process as we approach that for next year, Chair. I think it's obviously going to be very difficult for anybody to make any firm commitments at this stage, obviously. I think the recommendation, from my perspective, would be for it to be considered as part of the next budget setting process. He says, looking across at the 151 officer.
Okay, yeah, that's useful. Does that, I think you did infer that anyway, that it would be obviously to recommend it to be considered as part of the budget setting process along with the other recommendations you made. So what I'd say is, could you clarify that succinctly, either via email or if you want to write it down? We'll just give you a little bit of time when we've got more to say here or the next item. And then if you want to just send it over to myself or bring it over written down, we can then put it forward for the board to consider. Do we have a second? Well, let's get to the recommendations first and then we'll get a second.
Yeah, if that wasn't explicit, you know, I'm not making any, it's not my role to determine. What I'm saying is that looking at the report, it looks as though there's a clear case there, and rather than being part of the text, it may not surface itself again in addition in this forum. It's to put a business case together and then submit it to whatever the channels are for you know, resource increase as part of the budget process.
But what we'd have to do, I'll bring Emily in a sec, but what we are, if you're suggesting that we need to send a recommendation to Cabinet for them to consider from us at Council Cabinet meeting, it has to be formally put forward. Okay, that's great. Emily.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to draw the distinction between whilst a recommendation may be made to Cabinet, there's also the opportunity for, you know, further discussion with officers on proposals for future plans or how that plan is expressed in future years. And it may be that actually what the writer is proposing is not something for this plan, but for something for officers to take into consideration how they construct that plan going forward, which is not necessarily, I would say, a recommendation to Cabinet in respect of, because if you think about the recommendations in respect of this report, it's do they accept this report this year? But it could be that a recommendation to officers in considering the report for future years that they take a slightly different approach.
That's useful because that was the point I was trying to make, and Emily said it far better than I would, because we've got to remember that this is Cabinet adopting this particular plan, but that doesn't mean we can't have an overarching recommendation. But if you can maybe speak to Emily and get that wording sorted out, I think she captured more or less what you wanted to put forward.
Yeah, could I just make one point? I didn't raise it here, but it seems a bit strange to me that we've got a plan for this year, you know, 3 months into the current year. And that's why, one of the reasons why I wanted to raise this, because we're in danger of completely, you know, get behind the curve continually. So, I mean, I do take the, I'll send the recommendation to Emily, and if it needs changing, I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah, we need to agree it tonight though. So if you want to just get that sorted out within the next 5-10 minutes, and then I'll come back to you. Is that okay? Yep. Okay. Are there any other, Councillor Bonser?
Completely separate and hopefully very straightforward point, Chair. On page 9 of the report, there's an org chart with nothing on it. In the copy that I've got, anyway. The structure, an organisation chart. Structure. Page 25. Not got anything on it. I'm assuming that wasn't intentional.
Page 25,
just bear with us a second.
Page 9 of 75 I've got.
75, it's a little bit ambiguous.
I don't think it's crucial to acceptance of the report in general. But
Oh, yes.
Oh, you've got something in it, have you?
Ours is
Oh,
blank.
well, ours is blank.
Ours is blank.
yeah.
There we go. Can I just have a look at that?
Thank you, Chair.
There seems to be a discrepancy between the... it's not. Okay. So basically the hierarchy of the organisation, or from the top all the way through. Okay, we can get it circulated. Maybe just worth pointing out, if Cabinet have paper copies tomorrow, that they've got the amended version with the names on. Thank you for that, Councillor Bonser. Okay, are there any other points?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I thank the officers for this report, because clearly they are doing excellent work in our communities in keeping people safe, and obviously I bear in mind the COVID pandemic, which increased their workload immensely. So I understand, obviously, there is some backlog. But reading on page 23 of 208, under 2.1.5, the health, where it mentions the health of the people in Derby is generally worse than the England average. And also above that, it mentions the deprivation, which we suffer of terribly in various pockets and wards in the city and the economy. My concern is keeping people healthy. And obviously there are a lot of, it says in the report, a lot more hot food shops coming and being established. Can I have some confirmation from officers that they are doing their inspections and checks, both arranged or non-arranged? Because it does say on one page there are several overdue inspections, and I think the health of the people in Derby is of paramount to all of us, regardless of which ward we are here to represent. And clearly we want to make sure that all eating establishments are maintained within the Food Law Code of Practice, and that hygiene and good management is top of the priority list. Thank you.
So how are officers approaching that challenge of ensuring that they visit as many premises as possible?
Come on. Yeah, I can, so Chair. We do have a risk rating scheme, and we do focus on our high risk premises. There is a lot of churn of takeaway food premises, especially, so they have to be registered, and then they fall into an inspection programme that we try and do within 28 days. It is difficult to maintain that level of inspection when there's that level of churn, around 300-400 premises a year. But we focus on anything that is high risk activity, manufacturing, mainly takeaways that are subject to food prep, and it's normally our lower risk food premises. So even a food premise that sells pre-packed sweets, confectionery, which are generally low risk, still have a risk rating, and they normally fall in the low risk categories. So the risk to the public is low in that respect, although the Food Code of Practice does expect us to get round all of those premises in a timely fashion. But we're not alone in terms of that, in terms of local authorities. Other local authorities have similar issues. So where there's food prep, where there's high risk, where there's allergens, things that can cause real serious harm, or complaints, they're all dealt with as high priority. But any food product that is sold is technically classed as a food premise and needs an inspection, and it's those premises that sort of drop into the backlog of inspections.
Councillor Bolton, anything to add on that? No? Okay. I mean, it goes back to it's a challenge, isn't it? And there's only so much resource, which keys into potential recommendations from Councillor Wright, I suppose, in terms of looking at this. Okay. Are there any other comments, suggestions? There's no rush, Councillor Wright, as well. We can return to this. I'll find a time to come back to it before we finish the meeting, if that's all right, unless you're ready to put forward a recommendation already. You sent it? No. Yeah, okay, we'll come back to it. No problem. No rush. Well, until the end of the meeting, then there will be a rush. Okay, right, moving on then. Item 9, which is Derby Libraries, Community Managed Libraries Delivery. Simon? Oh, Pop, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The report provides information on the position of the community libraries, the terms of the transfer and negotiations which were entered into with the preferred bidder, and the subsequent decision to withdraw from the transfer due to reasons of escalating grant costs and future delivery not fully aligning with the Council's vision for community libraries. The position is also influenced by a new consideration of local government reorganisation, which is expected to take shape within the next 3 years. As a result of those negotiations and the decision and LGR, the report sets out a number of recommendations to note the delegated decision to withdraw from the transfer of the community libraries, adopting a new term, non-statutory community libraries, approving the continued delivery of the non-statutory community libraries and undertaking a new strategic needs assessment following the conclusion of LGR proposals. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to open this up to councillors. Councillor Wright?
Yes, I've got a few points to make. It seems to me that 2 years ago, we're in exactly the same position, well, probably more advanced position then than we are now, in that there was a tender that went out and it was in the final stages of identifying new trustees or organisations that are going to look after the libraries. 2 years on, and in that meantime, from a council perspective, we've had officer time spent, significant officer time spent on this. We've had consultancy fees. We've had the libraries basically in limbo for 2 years. And certainly I can only speak from the perspective of Chaddiston Library, which I visit regularly. Speaking to the volunteers there and the council officers that oversee that, no upgrade to IT systems, no new books, all the support systems, but more importantly, the volunteers who have run this service mainly volunteers on our behalf. Albeit it says in the report they were consulted very, very infrequently. I go and speak to them, and they're constantly looking for support. And indeed, recently I've fed back some issues on the community library. So overall, it seems to me we've had 2 years of leaving not only the libraries but the residents that rely on these for various services in limbo with no substantial move forward. So that's my first point. It's been difficult to describe it anything other than mismanagement. And I'm not criticising officers here, I'm criticising the cabinet here, because that's their responsibility to take this forward. And this issue in terms of, it says in the report about consultation, I don't feel consulted as one of the local councillors, and I have struggled. I've asked constantly for feedback from project boards. That's not unique to this board, because other boards are equally opaque as well, but I do think it's local residents, but in particular the library staff, ask us for what's going off. And then, so we're back at where we were probably a step back from where we were 2 years ago, because we've got no clarity. And then the recommendation is that we kick it down the road even further until local government reorganisation takes place. Now, That in itself is an issue, I think, because we're basically saying to residents and to the volunteers, before anything this sorted out, it's probably going to be years. You know, at the Local Government Association conference last week, the advice from Cumbria, which is a county council and district councils have already gone through reorganisation, is to treat reorganisation as a 7-year project, being realistic, and that was supported by other counties that have been through reorganisation. So, you know, and that assumes that we're going to get a decision on, you know, things look as though they're going to go according to the timescales, but they may well put back. So we're basically saying to everybody involved, including officers, that it's probably going to be 7 years. And with a new local authority, I don't think libraries is going to be their number one priority as they decide what they're going to be taking forward. You know, there's going to be a lot of other issues. And there's another issue that in relation, before we actually go through reorganisation, we've got to decide as a council which assets we transfer to this new local authority. So in some way or other, albeit it might be just an asset evaluation exercise, we've got to decide whether those libraries actually handed over or they're perhaps disposed of before reorganisation. So, you know, I can't see in any way that it's going to help anybody that kicking this can down potentially for another 7 years before we decide what, because the whole council has decided that these are important assets, important services for us. You know, I would like to and also, what it doesn't really say is, yeah, OK, they're coming back under council control. We put in a recommendation that we call them non-statutory, you know, as if that's going to have any impact whatsoever in terms of delivery of service or satisfaction of service delivery for the member of the public. What I would like to see is, rather than issues like that, you know, the community libraries, why can't we just call them community libraries? You know, I don't see an issue with keeping that. What's really more substantial is what are we going to be doing with these community libraries moving forward. It doesn't make any mention to that, apart from that we're going to make a decision X number of years down the road. So I would like to see some firm issues in there. What are we going to do with the IT systems? What are we going to do with maintaining and improving volunteer numbers? What are we going to do? At the moment, Chaddiston Library's got a part-time oversight. What's going to be issue for supervision moving forward? What's going to be issue for new books? All of these things are real issues to residents and to volunteers alike. So I get this distinct feeling, and I might be being unkind here, that this report is basically, right, we can't get the, for very valid reasons, I've got no doubt in terms of budget, in terms of other issues that we can't agree on. So we can't agree with sporting communities, how we're going to move forward. So this report just seems to be, well, we've got no, you know, what do we do next? Let's just leave it to the new authority to get on with. And in my view, that's not good enough for our residents. You know, they deserve better. They've been in limbo for 2 years, and now we're just saying we're going to be in limbo for another X number of years. So I would like to see a recommendation that we forget about the renaming, unless the government's saying to us, it's a legislative requirement, you've got to call them this, because to me that makes no difference at all. We get rid of the recommendation, or recommend that we remove the recommendation, we leave it till local government reform takes place sometime in the future, and we actually describe or ask officers to describe in more detail what the service is that we're going to provide, including those critical issues like IT, like new books, etc., things that people, either our staff rely on to do their job and volunteers to do their job properly, but, you know, issues like the new books that, you know, every time I go in, they keep saying to me, when are we going to get, it's been 2 years, well, 3 years really, since we've had any new books, when are we going to get those issues and provide a bit of certainty? Thank you.
Thank you. Is the response to that? Would you like to hear other contributions first? Pop, it's up to you.
I'll take other contributions, but I think if there's a direct question at this point that I can respond to, because otherwise this is the service going forward and it's too early to give a detailed breakdown of this, we're going to do X, Y, and Z within these libraries. Obviously, we've exchanged emails at the end of last week. I hope that provided a bit of reassurance to you. And again, it's as we move forward, we will get into more detail.
Okay, I mean, I think trying to sum this up, your concerns are valid, in my opinion. We seem to be approaching sort of an in limbo situation, potentially, pending the local government review. Now, that's all still to be decided upon. We don't even know what that's going to look like yet, and it's some years down the line. And my view is that we do have to be very careful that we don't allow our non-statutory libraries to wither on the vine, if you like. And I think that's pretty much what you were saying, was that we are going to need some clarity in the interim, not just wait for LGR. There needs to be detail in how we're going to look after these libraries between then and now. The now and then. Does that make sense, Pop?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think kind of looking forward, LGR will have an impact. There's a statutory element to libraries. We need to deliver a comprehensive library service. What that looks like under a new geography will have to have a new strategic needs assessment. So all of that will inform the service, and you're right, Councillor Wright, from that point going forward. The commitment now is that we continue to run these libraries, not to just maintain what the current offer, but to improve as much as we can in the intervening years. I was going to avoid saying this, but just in terms of a bit of the detail, operational detail, again, to give you a bit of reassurance. The reinstatement of the library manager post, we're already looking at tweaking that. So actually bringing in 2 part-time roles rather than 1 full-time role. So each role looks after 5 libraries each. So there's more of a dedicated resource. Similarly with the library assistants that we'll be bringing in as well. So there will be things that we do in the immediate weeks, months, to improve the support and offer that we put in place. And again, another operational one is the establishment of a wider volunteering network. So there's work that we're doing there as well. So this is why I say you will see this as we go forward. If we will be developing a business plan for improvement, occupancy of the libraries, bringing other services in. There are a raft of things that we're already starting to do. And just as a final element, and the one that I use as a key example here is Sinfin Library. We are in negotiation with another organisation to rent space within Sinfin. That rental will mean that Sinfin Library will double its opening hours. So there are already things that we're putting in motion that would not have been in place if we were just kicking the can down the road.
Thank you. Again, probably I would say, and I'm sure you probably agree with this, in terms of, just going back to local government review, we need our Derby City libraries to be thriving, well used, leading into that process, because what we don't want is Derby libraries to be potentially second best to a wider geographic area of a much larger unitary authority. Now, obviously, that whole conversation is to come, but we need to make sure that we have taken every possible measure to make those libraries viable, healthy, well used, and actually contributing to the local communities that they serve. So I think that sums up the kind of concern here, is that there could be an element of just keeping things going until we get to the point of LGR and more clarity on that. But actually, we really need to not... That's obviously on the horizon, we need to consider it, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be working really, really hard here to ensure that those libraries are delivering as best they can in the communities as things stand at the moment in the Derby City Unitary Authority. So have you got any more questions at this stage, Councillor Wright?
No, that update you've given us is very, very helpful. It's not just withering on the vine moving forward. It's they've withered on the vine to a certain extent already because of issues. We're already 2 years behind on things like, I go on about new books, for example. So it's stopping that. And then, from what you've said, Pop, it sounds as though there's as Councillor Holmes said, a plan to actually provide a proper service. And if that was part of, in other words, that's what it was. It sounds very much from the report, though. It's basically wait till local government reorganisation before you get your new, proper libraries as we envisaged they would become. But it sounds as though that's not your plan. If that was more explicit in the report, I would have found it a lot more acceptable.
Okay. Any other comments and questions? Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sure it'll come as absolutely no surprise to anybody that I've got a fair bit to say on this particular report. But start, as always, by thanking officers for bringing the report. I have one question for you, which I'll start off with, and then I don't expect you to answer any of the rest of it unless you choose to. I've got the utmost respect for both of you and for what's been attempted to be accomplished in the process that we've gone through. So the question is, I just want to get pure clarity on this point because I've heard different stories from different people. Did the council withdraw from the negotiations, or did sporting communities withdraw from the negotiations?
Ultimately, the final decision was a joint decision. The strategic director for communities and place spoke to sporting communities and agreed the termination.
Okay, thank you, Pop. That probably explains why I've heard two things, because both are true. So that explains it perfectly for me. So yes, thank you, Chair. And I've never felt my thunder so perfectly stolen by Councillor Wright there before, but I will go through and probably cover some bits of what has already been covered, but with a different vein to them. And I think it is very helpful to recap, as Councillor Wright touched on, where we were in May 2023 when the new administration came in and what the Cabinet's record has been on libraries up to this point, despite their proclamations of being the great saviours of establishments that were not closing. So when the minority administration came in, they inherited a newly set libraries budget, 10 in-house community-managed libraries alongside the 5 statutory libraries which had always remained in-house, and an ongoing expression of interest process with dozens of interested parties and stage 1 completed, which was not a bad start really to have inherited. Councillor Shanker, whose portfolio this was then in, endorsed the EOI process and then hastily cancelled it a few days later, which was U-turn number 1 for the new administration. Thousands of pounds, as we've discussed, were then spent on consultants, and numerous processes have been through, and then talk began of a Suffolk model. The Suffolk model was very quietly dropped, and I think that was due to the difference between the statutory and community-managed libraries, meaning they couldn't be amalgamated again, which ironically had been a decision made by the previous Labour administration when we went out for that strategic needs assessment. So that was U-turn number 2. So brought back to us after, in my view, several wasted months and a considerable amount of wasted money, was a near identical expression of interest process, but with one most important difference, which was all or nothing. Take 10 community-managed libraries or take no community-managed libraries. Unlike our previous expression of interest, this administration shut the door on anybody who wanted to champion either just the library within their community or a couple of libraries or a few, anything less than 10, and forced any new organisation that was interested, who would likely have had no experience in running any libraries at all, to take on all 10, which would be a mammoth ask of even the most dedicated community-focused organisation. And I warned when this came to exec scrutiny, do not put all eggs into one basket. Don't put everything on one proposal. Don't rest it all. At least get every single interest you possibly can. And if it turns out that somebody looking at all 10 is the best possible one to go for, then go for it. But make sure we have every possible interest. But the administration didn't listen. They chose to go ahead with looking for one organisation for all 10. And this process has continued, and we've been through exec scrutiny again, And then I saw a Facebook post from Councillor Chambers, who's the Cabinet member responsible, saying this was the 5th of December 2024, sporting communities will take over the management of our CMLs. Will take over. That is a guarantee from the Cabinet member about what's going to happen, or what has happened, because they will be doing it. This was followed by Councillor Nwaha saying that the administration had delivered this agreement that sporting community were going to take over the 10 community managed libraries. He was saying it had already happened, they delivered it. And at this point, I genuinely thought, you know what, maybe I'm going to have to eat some of the words that I've said at Exec Scrutiny. And I would really rather that had been the case. I wouldn't have hated that at all, because this is about library volunteers and library users. That's the backbone of what all this has been about from the start, is about the people using and the people helping us deliver this vitally important service. But then delay started about when the confirmed date for sporting communities to come in was going to be. It's pushed back a week, pushed back a month, pushed back a bit longer. And then volunteers tell us communication with them stopped. And then panicked emails to me and calls to me started from a few libraries. Can I find out what's going on? Because I used to tell them what was happening. Can we find out what's going on? And I was assured everything was absolutely fine. Then in this week coming, it's all going to be announced. And then the whole thing collapsed. Neither Councillor Chambers nor Councillor Nwaha should have told the public that this deal was confirmed, definite guarantee that they will be doing it and it's all been delivered before terms were signed and agreed. They both look pretty ridiculous for doing so. They both misled the public and in my view should both apologise for this. Now we're being led to believe by the Cabinet that this new agreement, which I'll come on to in a second, is somehow the best possible outcome, and that this is what was always wanted and provides all the guarantees in this new climate that's been talked about. Well, then why pursue the agreement to what seems like the 11th hour if we were extending it longer and longer to try and reach the agreement? Because I don't believe the climate shifted between me being given guarantees this was going ahead and the deal collapsing just 72 hours later. And if it did, then I don't know what negotiating was going on in the prior stages of that, if it fell apart in those 3 days. But in my view, the Cabinet member should just admit she oversaw the narrowing of an expression of interest process to eliminate 80% of previous expression of interests, oversaw handover criteria, which for me is very difficult for an organisation to agree to, especially if they've no experience of running libraries, given that there's no yearly guarantee of finances and a yearly stress-inducing guessing game of whether money will be coming in, accompanied by admittance in the document this was about saving money, which really worries me from an EOI perspective and gives that view of whether this was set up to fail in a sense. I think we should have looked at providing the finances required and then looked at ongoing agreements. I accept maybe in some form that wasn't possible, but I understand from a sporting community's perspective why this agreement would have been very difficult. And that the Cabinet member also jumped the gun with her announcements about the fact this was all secured and has now failed completely to secure a deal and has fallen back on the only thing that was possible to fall back on. For me, this is U-turn after U-turn after U-turn. It is truly Keir Starmer style stuff. But overall, I think we need to just be honest and call this what it is. It has been a failure of the last 2 years to achieve an agreement on outsourcing our libraries to a community organisation to run them. The administration's had 2 years and a bit to secure a deal, and catastrophically and abysmally failed to do so. I want to see the best now for all 15 libraries in this city. I was privileged to visit many of them in my previous role and meet with the volunteers and service users who demonstrate why this service is so vital for everybody in this city, and it's why I'm deeply, deeply disappointed we have reached where we are today. And we've touched a lot on local government reorganisation in contributions made already. And in my view, it is clear that while this might be short-term protection, in the long run, I think libraries are more at risk of closure now than they ever have been before. I don't think there's been a saving of libraries in this city. And again, I don't know what we were saving them for at the time, but I think they might need saving now. And for me, there's no guarantee that any of the community managed libraries are going to be open in 5 years' time. I think they're very much on the chopping block. The axe might be stayed for now, but I think what has happened now where we are is a stay of potential execution until local government reorganisation is concluded. We've no idea how long that's going to be. That means that until Derby City Council is abolished by this Labour government, libraries can continue to open, but afterwards, these libraries, our 10 CMLs as they are now, and our 5 statutory libraries, will rely on surviving another statutory needs assessment, which last time removed 10 out of 15 libraries in the city. 2/3 of them were removed from statutory offer, including all the libraries in locality 1. And they'll then rely on a majority county new authority choosing to continue to fund 10, possibly more, legally surplus to requirement libraries within the existing city boundaries. And anybody who knows political differences in all parties between the county and the city, and the fears many in the county have that through reorganisation the city will get resources that should be coming to the county, that's a massive gamble we're taking because local government reorganisation is being forced upon us. And I'm really questioning whether that future for libraries can be secured. We certainly can't guarantee it now, and the Cabinet should be open, they can't guarantee it now. So any suggestion from me, from our language cavalier Cabinet members, that they are saviours of libraries, which we're not closing when they're inherited by them, must be accompanied now by the true statement that these libraries, given a failure to secure the agreement of a long-term operator and the government's determination to abolish this council, might only have 2 to 3 years left. And I think that's why it's vitally important, and I'm very pleased to hear there may be more reports coming about development for the library service, because if these libraries are not the best they could possibly be in a couple of years' time, I doubt many of them are going to remain open for much longer.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we all should share concerns over what LGR is going to bring. And I think your points are certainly valid in that respect. Obviously, we're going to have to see how that progresses, but the scenario that you raised is potentially a likely one, in my view. We've been through it all before, and it was a horrible process. I'm not that positive that we're not going to have to face all of that again in the future, but that's for the future. One of the points that you actually made, well, I'll go back. Obviously, we don't have the Cabinet members here, and obviously a lot of things that you've raised and you've said, they're going to have to respond to that. Officers are here. They can't speak for the Cabinet members. We've spoken about that before. But one of the issues that you did raise, which I would ask Pop if he could comment on, you said about the organisations not being able to, or not having the option of maybe taking 1 or 2 or a small number of libraries on. It was all or nothing, if you like. Could you just give us the logic of that, if that's correct, and obviously what the logic behind that approach was, please?
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I will need to come back to you on that. It was before my time, so I don't know the detail.
No problem. It would be good to get clarity on that if you can, in due course. Councillor Eyre, is there any specific questions that you have for officers in terms of what you've said there? Is there anything that you would like clarity on? See if the officers can give you that tonight.
No, Chair. I think we had a productive discussion at Shadow Cabinet, and I appreciate the answers that were given there. And of course, I've had an answer to the first question that I raised. I think from my perspective, having held these in my portfolio before, I think it was very important to scrutinise what was coming before the executive. But in terms of questions, I've had the questions I wanted answered already.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on this item from councillors? Does anybody have a recommendation they'd like to put forward in terms of this item? Councillor Wright, just before we move on, do we have a recommendation formed for one of the previous items? Have you got that together yet?
Yes, I've emailed it to you and Steve.
Thank you very much. Stephen, have you received that? Not yet. Okay, no problem. Okay, well, we'll move on, but we need to deal with that before we finish the meeting as well. And I'll be asking for a seconder to validate that. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure this issue is far from over, as we know, and we will discuss it further in lots of meetings, I'm sure, including full council moving forward. Okay, moving on then to item 10, which is the financial outturn position for 24-25. Alison.
Thank you, Chair. So this report outlines the Council's financial outturn position for the General Fund. It also includes the Capital Programme, Treasury Management, the Housing Revenue Account, HRA, and the Dedicated Schools Grant and the Collection Fund. So it's quite a lengthy, detailed document. As you can recall, the last financial year, 24-25, started very challenging for the Council. We experienced significant pressures from, particularly in demand areas in social care and homelessness, inflationary increases and the continuation of the cost of living crisis. And they all had significant financial consequences for the Council. We did experience unfunded pressures within areas of up to £29 million. And as I said, they were predominantly in relation to adult social care and homelessness. We have, however, seen a positive aspect in the outturn report that for the first time in a number of years, we've got an underspend in children's services of £5.1 million. And this is testament to the great work that's been undertaken in recent years to focus our preventative services and things in a transformational way to be able to deliver care for our looked after children. And just to put that into context, the numbers of looked after children this morning were 546, and that's down from levels of over 670 that we saw post-pandemic. So you can see the good work that's been done in that area, and obviously that underspend is a brilliant position to be in. In terms of those significant challenges that we were experiencing, the Q1 position that we reported last year, we had a £9.6 million overspend, and in response to that, the Council immediately introduced control spending mechanisms to reduce that expenditure, and that involved the continuation of the spending panels to review recruitment and non-essential spending, and the consequences of that have been successful. And in the outturn report, you can see that the overspend had reduced to an in-year position of 3.997 million. So a really, really strong movement of, favourable movement of 5.66 million. And that was supported by underspends within directorates of 10.5 million. Those underspends are in addition to the savings of 8.1 million that's been delivered, and the report identifies 100% of the 24-25 savings have also been delivered too. In terms of the impact of that reduction in the overspend, that means that the drawdown from general reserves has been reduced to just shy of £500,000, which leaves us a general fund balance of 8.6 million at the end of the financial year, which represents 2.82% of the net revenue budget. But we do have planned contributions into reserves over the medium term, including this financial year 25-26 of 7 million. So by the end of the medium term plan, the general fund's estimated to be just shy of 16 million, which is a more favourable position and is 4.5% of the net revenue budget, and that's in line with the council's reserve policy for general fund balances, which are between 3 and 5% of net spend. As I said, the report also details the HRA, the Housing Revenue Account, and that outturned a surplus of £6 million against a budgeted surplus at the beginning of the year of about £750,000. So again, a favourable position on the HRA. The Dedicated Schools Grant, the DSG, it's a big area of risk to the council in terms of the high needs block, which funds specialist education provision. And we've well rehearsed the issues in this area, both nationally and locally. The DSG outturned with a £3.5 million deficit, which is lower than the planned deficit. When we set the budget, we was expecting a deficit of 8.6 million. So we did some good work in year to reduce that deficit position. That resulted in the DSG having a cumulative deficit of 16.189 million, and that currently is being managed by a statutory override, which means that the deficits are held on central government balance sheets, not individual councils, and that's been extended to 2028, and we are expecting announcements on how this will be dealt with once the statutory override ends. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Alison. I'll open this up. Do you have any comments or questions from councillors? Councillor Wright.
Yeah, one comment and one question, please. The comment, paragraph 1.18 is where you look ahead into this year and forward. I didn't think it was very balanced, that paragraph. I mean, it talks about issues that the government may have helped us with, like longer term planning, for example, but it doesn't mention the pressures on the council that come direct from government policy, like employers' national insurance not unfunded, not fully funded wage rises, etc. So it paints a very positive picture in one direction, but doesn't look at the reality of cost pressures that are a direct result of government policy. So that's a minor issue, but I think it struck me in last year's budget report. It was similarly sort of skewed. The other issue is that there seems to be left out. You did a table last time about where all the savings came from, and it was broken down. I couldn't find anywhere in the report. It gives directorates where the savings are coming from, but it doesn't break it down into where, you know, the line items for those. It just gives a general overview, which I found very useful last time in terms of being able to understand where efficiency savings, technology developments that led to productivity increases were coming from. So a question is, where would I find those issues in more depth so that I can scratch below the surface?
Do you mean the budget savings of 8.1 million, or do you mean the in-year savings of underspending budgets?
The former, the latter's in the appendices at the end, isn't it? Yeah, which was very, very helpful. And I think, you know, while you mentioned that, Alison, I think there's a lot of positive, particularly around adult social services. I know there's a huge amount of pressures, but some of the issues in terms of being able to make better contributions from people, I think that's very, very positive. And but yeah, it was the other element of it.
So you'll find that in the budget report, there'll be lists of all pressures and savings that were done in the 24-25 budget. So that will be in the March 24 budget report, and that will have all the details of all those savings that make up that £8 million that we've had to deliver this year. It would be, there's quite a few pages of it, but that's the reference document, Councillor Wright.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments, suggestions or recommendations on this item? No? Okay. Stephen, can we just pause to see if we can sort the recommendation out from whatever the item was? I can't remember what the number was now. Do you want to read that out?
Yep, will do, Chair. So I've got that, Councillor Wright. Thank you very much now for the under the food safety. So I'll read this out, Chair, shall I?
So this was item 8, just
That's
for
right, yes.
reference.
To recommend that in the development of the report for 26-27, Cabinet asks officers to consider 1, using the General Work Plan, Section 8.7, to formulate a costed business plan to meet the objectives of the 5 elements of the work plan. 2, developing a productivity/efficiency saving objective, open brackets, sickness, mobile IT support, feedback to government on regulatory overburden, close brackets, and 3, that the requirements of funding 1 and 2 forms part of MTFP discussions for 26-27.
You're like our very own little AI bot. Yeah, I think so. It's very detailed, but I don't think there's anything wrong with pushing that towards Cabinet to consider, but we need a seconder. Do we have one of those? Yes, thank you, Councillor Eyre. Okay, are we okay for that to be a recommendation to Cabinet for item 8, which is the Food Safety, Food Standards, Animal Feed and Health and Safety Service Plan, which was 25-26? We all agreed? Okay, well, that's carried. Yeah. Anyone against? No. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thanks for your work on that one, and we'll see what Cabinet make of that. Okay, right, so final item then of the Cabinet agenda that we're going to look at this evening is performance, which is item 11. Oh, okay. You again. It's not normally yourself,
No,
is
it's not. Apologies. Due to annual leave, Sarah and Heather aren't available, so it isn't my report. But I'll introduce it for to Scrutiny Board. So this is the 24-25 annual report, and it brings together a summary of what's been delivered over the past 12 months. It also details a summary in there as well around our revenue and capital spend, which demonstrates hopefully some of the value for money that we're delivering, and it gives some context of where the money goes and where the funding sources are. The annual report's intended to be a summary, bringing out highlights from our performance monitoring reports that have been presented to Cabinet and Scrutiny Board throughout the year. There's no statutory duty to publish an annual report, but it's good practice to do so, and it's good practice to reflect really on what the council's delivered over the past year. There's two parts to the report. Appendix 1 is the high-level summary, and there's an at-a-glance summary of all commitments for the 24-25 delivery plan, alongside the strategic risks at the end of March 2025, recognising these are dynamic and have changed through the year. Appendix 2. The detailed performance report did come to Scrutiny Board last month. At the June meeting, so there was lots of discussion on that quarter 4 monitoring report, and in essence there's no changes from that June report that's detailed as the appendix here. It's primarily the annual report, which is the new document. The report gives an opportunity to reflect, as I said, on the achievements of our colleagues and partners over the last year, and I think looking at the report, I think officers are there's lots of things in there to be proud of. The report will go to the Audit and Governance Committee at their July meeting as part of our governance framework, and then after that it will be published on the website by the end of July. Thank you.
Thank you. I do understand if you may not have some of the detail here, considering you sort of helping Heather out. On page 200, just a quick question, and if you can't answer it, it's fine, we'll get an answer sort of later on. But when you look at Green City and you see these are the themes, so Green City and Working Smarter, at quarter 4, which obviously is well advanced, you've got very low percentages in terms of priority performance measures meeting target. Both of those are at 33%. But then it says percentage of council delivery plan actions delivered or on track, it's 100%. Seems to be a bit of an oxymoron there, really. If at quarter 4 it's at 33, but it's also 100% on track, I'm trying to work out how those two numbers can be so different.
Can you just clarify which appendix you're looking at?
It is
Council
2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I say, if you don't have an answer now, it's fine, but it would be something that I'd be genuinely interested in understanding a little bit better, because it seemed to contradict, the percentages seem to contradict themselves, especially at quarter 4, when it's then pretty much wrapping up, if you like, for the year.
I'll get an answer to that and get back to you.
Thank you. And obviously, if we maybe want to clarify or suggest different areas of performance percentages, then I'm sure we can have that conversation. But yeah, that might lead to a further discussion. Has anyone got any questions or comments on this item? No? Any recommendations to Cabinet on this item? No? Okay. Thank you very much. I believe, Stephen, that is the end of today's business. Thank you very much for your contributions, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you.